So Dave and I are actually going to do a little song and dance here to get us started. I have some videos in the presentation, so he's going to take them over. We'll try to keep this interactive. I have 45 minutes. I don't think I'll go the entire 45 minutes, so there'll definitely be time for questions. Having run a startup in the travel space for the last 3.5 years, I've probably had the joy of experiencing a lot of the things that you're going to experience, so feel free to ask anything. But what I'd like to talk about today is personalization and automation. Before starting OLSET, I did not come from the travel space. I was in the data space, working with many, many large companies, helping them to unleash the data that they sit on and the data that they have within their organizations that they're not using in order to optimize their performance. And throughout that time, I had the joy of traveling around 2.1 million miles and staying in hotels around 1,500 nights in a period of less than a decade. So just to understand the room a bit, how many of you have traveled more than 1 million miles in your lives? Okay, so there's a few. Norm, I expected you to be in that category. What about 2 million? Okay, we dropped a bit. What about 3 million? Nice, okay. Are we going to compete 3.5? Yes! Okay, so I'm right around the 3.5 million mile. The only reason I know that is I'm a 2 million miler on American and a million miler on United, and then I have a bunch of other random things. But that is not a fun experience. It's especially not fun when you're doing it internationally and visiting about 3 or 4 continents on a monthly basis. And it's really not fun when none of these providers know anything about you. So Brittany, no offense, I will give an example on Expedia, having had 151 past bookings on Expedia. So thank you for the service, but there's a bit more that can be done. I'll talk about some of these things. But before I go into travel, I wanted to talk about personalization in general. How many of you use Netflix? Quite a few, as I expected. How many of you sit there and search for, which video should I watch today, and spend a lot of time searching versus just going with the recommendations that they give you? Okay. Anybody goes with recommendations? Good. That's what they've figured out, that if they let their millions of users and their millions of titles try to find each other, that just doesn't work. People don't want to spend the time. They don't want to go through that entire experience. But they've created a smart recommendation system that enables them to understand what are the preferences of this particular user, what are the attributes of the movies and series that we have, so we can give you smart recommendations and keep you engaged. They're not the only ones. This is very prevalent in many other industries. Here are some numbers from a presentation from the head of personalization at Netflix from a couple years ago. And today, more than 70% of the movies and videos watched on Netflix are based on personalized recommendations. Because they know that unless they can keep you engaged, this is just not going to work and people are not going to use the application. Amazon, the great Amazon today, more than 40% of their sales are based on personalized recommendations. Why? Because they figured out that if they can give you a personalized recommendation, you're 916% more likely to convert. Imagine what that could mean in travel, right? The very low conversion rates that we have, if we could drive them up by 900%, that would entail very, very, very large numbers. Okay? So why have we been denied personalization in travel? As I mentioned, I had 151 past bookings on Expedia. I also used Concur, and I had more than 100 bookings in the Concur platform in a period of less than a decade. So the very condensed period. Guess what? I always booked the same types of hotels. I always flew the same airlines in the same routes and took the same repeat trips every month. So every month it was San Francisco, Hong Kong, Hong Kong, Singapore, Singapore, Melbourne, Melbourne, Sydney, back home, San Francisco, Rio, Rio, Sao Paulo, Mexico City, and back home. Every month, okay? And that was for 36 months straight. And yet whenever I went to book a trip, nobody knew anything about my preferences. Nobody knew what I booked in the past. None of that existed. That's when my last company was acquired, and I said, it's time that we did something in personalization and automation around the travel space. Let's look at some of the challenges in the travel industry, though. If we're looking at the evolution of how online travel started, look at 20 years ago, the first 10 years, and I'll show you a video around that in a second, first 10 years were all about the plumbing. How do we even get these things online? How do we enable people to book flights? How do we enable people to book hotels in an online manner so it all actually works? The next 10 years, which is 2005 to 2015, were all about how do we get people to actually come and visit us. So if we're looking at online travel agencies or travel providers like hotels and airlines, how do we fight the fight to get people to the top of the funnel? And companies are investing ridiculous amounts of money in that. If you look at companies like Priceline and Expedia, they passed the $3 billion mark on top-line marketing investment in 2015. Okay? On the business side, companies are investing a lot of money around acquiring customers, but their hotel attach rate is very low. So I go to my Concur or Sabre or Amadeus, I know you're all in the room, and I try to book a trip and I book a flight, but I don't book a hotel for some reason. There's a lot of different reasons for it, but it's just not happening. So we spend a lot of money to bring people to the top of the funnel, but then these funnels are ridiculously leaky and people just don't convert in them. So we decided to help organizations do that, starting on the hotel side, okay, but expanding from there to other areas. Now don't just believe me on this. Let's have Dave cue up a quick video. This is from Focusrite 3 years ago when we presented at Focusrite. So thanks, Norm, and I see Bob's not here, but he was here at some point. This is a video by Brad Gerstner, one of the most famous people in the travel industry, talking about the evolution of what we've done and where we are going in the next 10 years. Hopefully the sound works too. It's a short video, it's only 1 minute.
Somebody asked up here, what's the next big idea? And I said, it's the same as the last big idea. A couple years ago, somebody asked up here, what's the next big idea? And I said, it's the same as the last big idea. I mean, the fact of the matter is, in this room, and I don't know, year 10 or 12 for me, but I look at it, there's been maybe $150 billion of enterprise value created in online travel. Almost all of it, 95+%, is online booking of accommodation, right? And so you look at that, the last 10 years has been a story about effectively wiring the world's hotels to the internet. There's not been a lot of innovation. I mean, it's still kind of 10 blue links in terms of the consumer experience and shopping for it, understandably, because Brian's still trying to just get this stuff wired to the web. I would suggest that the next 10 years, so we've made a tremendous amount of progress. Booking.com, 350,000 properties now. These guys are adding properties every day at a rapid clip. The next 10 years, I think, is going to be about more of the artificial intelligence that's going to predictively help understand what I want. And instead of me having to spend so much time shopping, booking, researching, etc., it's going to know in my calendar that I'm coming here. It's going to go search all the sites for me. It's going to book it on my behalf. These are bits and bytes. So the fun part from a consumer perspective, I think, is in front of us. The innovative and disruptive part from a consumer perspective is in front of us. I think the infrastructure part is going to continue, but that's largely been what the last 10 years has been about.
Thanks for watching this demo. That's my next video. So this is from 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. Just so everybody knows, Brian was the CEO of Orbitz, which is now Expedia. He talked about 350,000 properties on Booking. They're already at more than 700,000, and so are many others. So we've definitely made a lot of progress in that area. We have still to make a lot of progress in the area of automation and personalization, right? And that's where we focus. So OLSET has created a platform for OTAs, TMCs, hotel chains, airlines to utilize our APIs to drive personalization and automation and understand what are our travelers actually interested in order to improve conversions. Now, how do you create something like this? How does it actually work? Conceptually, it's very similar to what has been done in other industries. It's a knowledge-based recommender system. What's a knowledge-based recommender system? It's a system that, on one hand, understands the traveler and knows what the traveler preferences are. Now, when we say understand the traveler and what are their preferences, there's a big gamut of what these types of travelers are. It could be a completely anonymous traveler coming to an online travel agency for the first time and we've never seen them and we don't know what they're actually interested in, to the complete other end of the spectrum, which is frequent business traveler that's making that 72nd trip to New York, and the last 71 times they've booked the exact same flight in the exact same hotel. Right? So your system needs to learn and understand, no matter what type of traveler this is and how much history, how much information we have about them, how do we give them the correct recommendations based on the data that's actually available. So let's start with the anonymous traveler. Right? We imagine this anonymous traveler that we know nothing about, but guess what? We actually know a lot about even the most anonymous traveler, because we know how many people are traveling just based on the search data that they provided us, where they're going from, where they're going to, how long in advance are they booking, how many nights are they going for if we're talking about hotels. Is this over a weekend or not? In many cases, what flight did they book? What airline? How many connections do they have? What time of day are they leaving on? So there are at least 10 pieces of data, even for the most anonymous traveler that you know, in order to be able to cluster them with other people who have exhibited a very similar behavior and at least give them better recommendations that make more sense for them. Right? And there could be very, very small cues that you can use to understand, well, are they traveling business class or not? Right? Are they traveling coach class? Are they booking 2 months in advance or 1 day in advance? All these cues give you a lot of information if you're a data geek and you love the data and you have aggregated a lot of data from many different sources to understand the behavior of people. Then the other extreme is the known traveler, and that known traveler could exhibit different behaviors as well. On one hand, they could be making that repeat trip again, that we know exactly what they want, and if exactly that same inventory is all, we can just offer it to them, so give them one option. Okay? Or if they're making a different trip, that person who traveled to New York is now going to Seattle, how can we offer them things that are similar, but now we won't give them one option, we will give them multiple options in order to make sure that they're comfortable with what is being offered to them. So not only are we looking at the technology that enables you to do this, you have to bring travelers on a trust journey. The trust journey is a very, very critical component in the travel space and many other spaces. Previous presenters talked about all the bots and all the automation that people are looking at right now. I think that one of the big gaps that we still have is the underlying technology is really cool. And we talked about it 4 years ago, but in order for people to actually use it, you have to bring them on that trust journey, and many people are still failing in that particular area. And then between the two extremes of an anonymous traveler and a known traveler, you have the semi-known traveler, which is somebody who's anonymous but has applied filters, or you have cookies about them, and all of that data can be used in order to drive better recommendations for them. But that's not enough. Understanding who the traveler is one piece of the puzzle. The other side of the puzzle, and this is something we learned very quickly when we started doing the work, is the actual inventory. And so how do I understand more about the hotels that are available out there in order to give people the right recommendations? Because the data that exists today about the hotels is quantitative data. Does it have a pool? Does it not have a pool? Does it have Wi-Fi? Does it not have Wi-Fi? Does it have a bar? Does it not have a bar? Right? Those are the types of information that are available today. And if you want to know more, you have the joy of reading thousands of reviews on TripAdvisor or other sources, but most travelers prefer not to do that. So what we learned is that we need a mechanism to categorize all of this data and understand not the quantitative data about hotels, but the qualitative factors about hotels. And that means that we need to be able to scan through these millions of reviews, 60 million in our case so far, and extract the sentiments from them so we know what's good and what's bad about every hotel en masse across these many, many millions of reviews. And we can expose that data to travelers and tell them, hey, not only is the pool here existent, but many people are saying positive things about it. Or the bar is fun, right? People are very excited about it. Or the fitness center is good. And if you can aggregate that data and both use it in the recommendations and expose it to people and give them the information that they're looking for, that's when you're much more likely to convert because you're building that trust, which is very important to travelers. And we'll see examples for that and screenshots in a second of how that actually works. Then you can take both these pieces of data of who's the traveler, what do I know about the inventory. In the corporate world, you also add corporate policies and things like that on top of it. Put that all into that recommender system and have the ability to give people the recommendations of the correct hotels. Now we're also doing this in flights and over time activities and many, many other areas in the travel space. Now, why is that sentiment data and the review data so important? There's a lot of research in the area, but Kelly McGuire and Bethany Moon released a big study around what's actually driving hotel conversions for people. And I think that if you ask yourselves, well, what's really driving the conversion, you'll all think about the price as the initial factor. But when we really dive into it, of what actually drives conversions, it's, well, what did other travelers say about this? Because if I can book a hotel for $20 a night, that doesn't mean I'll book it if it's a really, really bad property or if it doesn't meet the features that I actually am interested in and want. So what's really driving is that sentiment data. And if you can aggregate it very effectively, you have a very powerful tool to drive conversions. Obviously, price and many other factors are important as well. I won't splurge on a $2,000 a night room, even if it gets the best reviews possible. But if I have a range of movement, then I will select the one that will give me the features that I'm interested in. So let's look at an industry example, right? And I constantly run searches on different online travel agencies and take screenshots so I can show them to customers that we're working with and explain to them how things could be done better in their environment. This is one of the original ones that I started with because I was a very frequent user of this particular site. And there are interesting factors. This is a very, very simplified example. We take currently around 43 different features into consideration when we make a hotel recommendation. This takes one feature into recommendation, but you'll see how it works. But before we dive into the example, let's set it up and say this is from 2 years ago, before Orbitz was part of Expedia. Right? The facts in the industry are that unless a person sees the hotel they're interested in, somewhere in the first few hotels that are recommended, so it's either the first one or one of the top 5, they are not going to book that particular hotel. Very few people scroll to the second page and third page and fourth page and actually book a hotel there. So according to Expedia, 51% of the people book one of the first 5 hotels presented. Similar numbers for Orbitz for the first hotel presented. And then almost everybody books a hotel on the first page. which means if you're not showing people the right hotel as one of the 5 first hotels, you're very unlikely to convert that particular person. Remember what I said earlier, the conversion rates are around 2, actually industry average is less than 1, but when we add some of the bigger sites that are converting better, they're around 2 to 3%. What that means is that 97% of the people aren't booking. So those 3% that came to your site and saw the hotel that they wanted as one of the first 5 actually converted. There's another 97% that didn't see the right hotel for them in the first 5 hotels, and you lost them. And even if we assume that 70% of those people, right, 70% out of everybody who came to visit your site, didn't have an intent to book. They were just researching, they were just looking. That still means that 30% did want to book, and your conversion rate is only 1 out of 10 for the people who are interested in booking. And so there's a huge opportunity here to capture these other 9 people who really wanted to book, but you just didn't show them the right hotel. Let's look at an example. So I ran a search as a luxury traveler, right? And the way we did this is we actually booked a flight before this and selected a business class ticket. So it's a pretty high-end ticket, and these are the hotels that were recommended as a follow-on to the particular booking. You can see it's a complete range of hotels, and actually none of these are real luxury hotels. So as a luxury traveler, I look at the hotels and they lost me. They didn't get one of the top 5 hotels that I could potentially be interested in as part of the recommendation. Then I ran the same search as a business traveler, booked a flight, economy plus, a day in advance, right? Pretty good indication, middle of the week, that it's a business traveler. And what we saw here is that some of these hotels could actually be a fit. Notice that these are the exact same hotels that were recommended earlier. So who I am as a traveler was never part of the consideration. It was all about profitability and all sorts of other factors. A very good white paper released by Expedia on how they actually do their sorting about 3-4 weeks ago. So if anybody's interested in that, definitely a good read. Okay? And then we ran a search as a budget traveler. So searched a long time in advance, economy class, and guess what? You got the exact same recommendations. Okay, so here again, none of these hotels are a good fit for me. So even in this very, very simplified example, we can see that we lost 2 out of 3 of our people because they didn't get the right hotel as one of the first 5 recommendations. And this is what's happening across the industry today. But that's why these conversion rates are so low. Now, we could change this picture. We could use APIs to learn more about these travelers and not only use these recommendations to give them the right hotels, but also expose to them why these recommendations were provided. Right? So this is happening in the real estate industry now, where a lot of companies are exposing information to you on what are travelers saying, why is this a good fit for you? And we believe that it's critical in the travel industry as well. So if we run this search again, but now we enrich that search with a lot more data, we can see that a personalized recommendation for a luxury traveler, on one hand, will show completely different hotels, right? All these hotels are actually luxury hotel. They're a good fit for me as a luxury traveler. But we don't just show you this data, we also give you enriched data on, well, why is this recommendation made for me? And we can see that the hotels meet your star rating, your price preferences, they're very close to where you want to be. But also we look at specific features and we say, look, as a luxury traveler, we know that there are things that are important to you, like the level of service, the comfort of the room, how nice the bathrooms or how comfortable the beds are. And many other travelers have said really good things about these features that are very important to you. So you can be confident that the services that you're interested in as a luxury traveler all exist in this particular hotel. As a business traveler, I get a completely different set of hotels. Right? That set of hotels is much more geared towards business travelers. And in addition to that, we're looking at different features that are important for business travelers. So we tell them, look, the fitness center is good, the bar is good, you might be interested in room service because you're here for a short time. These are the things that are important to a business traveler, and we can highlight these features so you have no reason to go elsewhere and try to look for this data. And obviously, a budget traveler has a completely different set of criteria. Types of hotels they're interested in are different, but for them, it's really important to have that free breakfast and free Wi-Fi and components like that. So you can change the search and change the criteria that you're actually adapting into that search based on what the travelers are likely to be interested in. Will you get it correct 100% of the time? Absolutely not. But if you get it correct 80% of the time or 60% of the time, and you increase your conversions, you have a lot of success in that particular area. Okay? So talking about that success, and I'll skip through these quickly, we have a number of great success stories with very large OTAs that we're deployed with, and we're looking in all the deployments at double-digit growth in conversions, double-digit growth in revenue margin, and that is very, very important to prove that these things actually work. Some of these customers are running 25, 30 million searches per month, and we're seeing very, very good results from these deployments. This is across multiple customers and multiple environments. And talking about those environments, looking at the travel industry, when we talk about hotel attach rate, it's not just one place. It's not just people who are coming to book hotels directly, right? It's direct hotel bookings. It's dynamic packaging, so people who are selling hotel and flights simultaneously. It's post-flight cross-sales. We're working with a number of airlines now to say, well, your post-flight cross-sales are around 0.2%. The industry is kind of slow in that area. How can you increase these hotel sales? Because as you heard earlier from Brad Gerstner, 95% of the revenue and the margin in the travel industry comes from hotels. This is a very important factor. And then hotel attach rates in the corporate space, very important as well. Switching gears for a second. Okay, we really believe, and this is to give David some time to key up the video, we really believe that personalization is only the first step in the travel industry. Because what personalization lets us do, and the understanding of who the travelers are, what it enables us to do is to automate the whole process. We actually have patents around the concept of zero-step booking, which means, and we'll see the video for that in a second, we can actually integrate into your calendar and understand when your next trip is going to be based on the meetings that you have in your calendar, focused on business travelers, obviously. And if we know that, great, you're going to New York again for the 72nd time, and you're going to book this same flight, and you're going to book this same hotel, why make you do all the work? Why not just send you a confirmation for that particular trip? If you want to cancel it afterwards, that's great. That's not a problem. But make sure that we can automate and make your life much more seamless. Let's start the video, and we can see how that actually works. This is me entering a meeting into my calendar. I'm going on yet another trip to Colorado. Okay, I've done the same trip 50 times before. I've always taken the same flight when I go there. Typically stay in the same types of hotels. I'm not sure if the video's running, but that's fine. And what we can see is that when I put these calendar entries into my calendar, we have the ability to now automatically integrate with that calendar. And this could happen via a actual business travel app that asks me to integrate into my calendar. Or if I'm a frequent user of an airline, I'm a frequent user of a hotel chain, they can, when they install the app on my phone, ask me for access to my calendar so they can provide a far better service for me. And that means that a few minutes after entering the entry into the calendar, we can complete the booking for you in an automated way. This can either happen completely automated, or it can use the one-step method, which we're showing here, of giving you a couple of recommendations that are a good fit for you. I can select the right hotel, I can select the right flight, and based on that, because I have my credit card data, etc. in there, the entire process can be fully automated as part of a booking process. The problem here, switch over, the problem here is actually not a technology problem. All this technology exists today. We go back to the trust problem and making sure that customers actually believe that you're giving them the right offerings. And how do you take them on that trust journey so they're comfortable with these recommendations? And there's a lot of ways. It's much more psychology. I'm learning more from my wife, the psychologist in that area, than anything related to technology in order to make this a reality. So where can this go from here? There's a lot of opportunities to not just integrate with OTAs and TMCs, which is what we're doing today, but hotel chains are interested in providing a better service to their hotel customers. Airlines are interested in providing a better service to their frequent flyers and frequent users. And all of these steps can be automated. One area that is near and dear to our hearts, and we've actually released an app for, is the Unmanaged Business Traveler. And that is enabling these people who travel a lot for business but don't have a managed solution to automate their entire process. And that's one place where we're showing in the Cinch app, anybody who wants to check out Cinch Travel, the ability to learn your preferences, save specific trips and say, I will be taking this trip again in the future, remember my preferences, and then with one click, rebook multiple trips again and again if you do that trip frequently. So I'll wrap up here with talking about what does it really take as a team to build something like this. And we've learned that it takes 3 key components if you're looking to build up a startup in this particular space. 1, working with large travel providers is a very big slog. It takes a very long time to sign them up as customers. Even in some of the cases where I showed the business cases where we saw double-digit uplift of sales, I was shocked, and I'd come from 3-4 year sales cycles with large telcos and financial institutions. I was shocked that it took 9 months after a customer saw double-digit uplift in conversions until they actually signed the deal. So it takes a very long time, and you need to be resilient. But more importantly, you need to have the technology around the recommender system, big data analytics, and understanding data. And the third factor, which is very important, is the DevOps. Being able to build these systems, and Divya talked about how much cheaper it is to build these systems now, but using AWS or Rackspace or any of these other providers, if you do want to build these enterprise systems, a lot of things fail. So you need to have the right people that can maintain that infrastructure correctly. And those really are the core components that we have in our team. And we think that that's been a key driver for some of these successes. So I'll pause here and open it up for any questions. I think I'm exactly on time, so that's good. And yeah, feel free to ask me anything about this or other stuff.
So, Gadi, you as a experienced business traveler, you've worked for corporations that have travel policies, and very often, they're trying to. As a traveler, you're traveling on the corporate dollar, not your personal dollar. Mm-hmm. So this personalization ability is great, but it bumps up against corporate travel policy, which is trying to drive their travelers to preferred hotels and airlines that give them discounts. And if they don't get that market share, they're going to lose the discount. So how do you square the personalization against corporate travel policy?
Absolutely. So there's two factors that go into that discussion. Right? One is the practical answer, which I'll start with, and then there's the more correct answer. Okay, the practical answer is that we incorporate travel policies into every recommendation that we do in the corporate space. Okay? That's important, but what we really are seeing, and Alec here can attest to this, is that a lot of times if I am a large corporation, I will have 20, 30 preferred hotels in a specific region. And what we do is we'll throw all these 30 preferred hotels at the traveler, and most of the times they won't book any of them because the first 10 that are displayed to them are completely irrelevant to them. But hotels 11 and 12 are really relevant to them, but they'll never see them. So we make sure that those hotels that bubble to the top, out of the preferred hotels, are actually correct for this particular traveler? That's the real answer. The bigger discussion in my mind is, well, we have travel policies, right? But if 80% of the people are booking outside of the system, those travel policies are completely irrelevant because nobody is adhering to them anyway, and you're not getting the revenue anyway. So we need to stop looking at the bookings that way. We need to start saying, well, how do we offer the right services to the traveler to make sure that they're converting, so we bump up that 20% or 15% attach rate to a 60% attach rate, which is where it should be. Hopefully that makes sense.
Hi, Gadi. Julia Douglas. I work in the retail side of the travel industry, and it seems as though your presentation is very much targeted at OTAs. But it's interesting because the attachment is much higher on the retail side. Instead of it being sort of interest, there's serious intent. And there is the ability to sort of have that continuity, which solves the trust journey and a personal recommendation as opposed to sort of online reviews. I'm curious if you've thought about going through the retail channels to sort of automate the personalization process, because the personalization is definitely there.
Yeah, so we're absolutely doing that today. We're working with large companies like TUI Travel and organizations like that have a retail presence. And there are, again, two factors that are very important there. One is really having that knowledge of what this traveler has done in the past and aggregating that data so the travel agent can get a much better recommendation. Right? The travel agent usually knows the inventory, but they know very little about the traveler. So giving them the information and saying, look, these are the attributes that are relevant for this traveler. How can we make sure that those are translated into the inventory that we're recommending, and giving the travel agent in the retail environment a better recommendation? The other factor, and I have other examples where this has shown double-digit uplift as well, so I'm happy to discuss those later. The other example is an unknown traveler, right? Unknown inventory, so new inventory that we're trying to sell, and how do we get more insights into that inventory without actually having to go there and stay there, and understanding what types of travelers have really appreciated it, et cetera. So there's two different areas that there is a big impact in the retail space as well.
We have Ruha from Dallas here in the back.
Hello. So I think what you talk about, the personalization, is focused on the platform. And I'm curious about, like, for example, the more adventurous travel, like if I go to Easter Island or something, Galapagos Island. So for those, because they need a lot of research because there's so many different tools and different things. So for that kind of personalization, like, what's your opinion and what do you think? How can we reach to that level?
So personalization doesn't work in every particular case. I'll be the first to admit that, right? And that's why a lot of the examples are business-related examples. And then you can see an uplift in other places. When I used to take my annual vacation before I started a startup, I enjoyed the research part as well. Right? The research part already made me feel like I'm there, and I really enjoyed that side. Personalization will not replace that. That's where virtual reality will come back in, right? And providing these solutions. Saying that, there is definitely the ability to filter out a lot of stuff that's not relevant for you, even when you're about to go to Easter Island or Galapagos or any of those locations, because we know roughly what types of accommodations you like staying in. When we look at personalizing activities, which we're not doing today, but potentially in the future. By the way, we did do a pilot with Yelp around restaurant recommendations, and it works. So you can extend this model to other areas. But I think that activity recommendations is definitely a big, big area that can be done effectively. We're not doing it today. But I think that when you go to Galapagos or any of those places, or people who are going on cruise ships, right, and are taking a cruise, and what activities should you do when you get to port instead of just looking at that long list that's offered by the cruise line, those are all areas that are ripe for innovation and ripe for disruption.
So, Gadi, you used the example of the frequent business trip and staying at the same hotel, taking the same flight. But it seems like the more difficult problem is applying what I did on one trip and then taking it on a different trip. So how are you actually trying to capture the personal attributes of a given trip versus just the actual history?
Yeah. So whenever a trip occurs, whether it's a trip that was booked through one of the partners that we worked with, or you can forward past itineraries and do any of these things, we extract all the attributes. One of the APIs that's offered extract all the attributes that are associated with that trip. So if we think of a flight, right, we say, what airline was it? How many connections did the person have? What time of day? What class? What fare class did they book? How long in advance did they book? Do we know that information? Where did they leave from? Where did they go to? All these attributes are captured because that information exists. If you look at a hotel, it's much broader than that, right? So you know what style of hotel is this? What star level? Where is the destination? Because for hotels, the destination is very, very important. There is a variance on price based on different locations. And what's the time of year? Because that changes as well. If you come to San Francisco during Dreamforce and paid $1,300 for the, I can't even remember, the Red Roof Inn by the airport, right? That's not what you will usually pay for a Red Roof Inn by the airport. So you need to take all these factors into consideration when you capture a trip and understand which are outliers and which are not outliers. But if I see that, oh, you know what, whenever Norm is traveling, he tends to fly United or Star Alliance, right? So that's probably his top preference out of the 20 trips that I have, but he does have 4 trips on American whenever he goes to Dallas. So let's consider that as well and think about that. And I see that he usually stays in Marriott's, hey, but whenever he goes to Seattle or to Bellevue, he's staying at the Hyatt. We can collect all of these attributes and use them for other trips as well. That's why when I said, though, that you need to bring the traveler on that journey, because your next trip to New York, if it's the 22nd one, I can just give you the exact same options. But when you go to Seattle, I will give you 5 options and give you more information in order to understand what your preferences are. Norm is a longtime friend of OLSET, and we have all his data.
Hi, my name is Ferris.
It was coming suddenly
from
the ether.
From the sky over there. I was wondering if a traveler could have a few personas.
Absolutely.
For example, you know, I'm a business traveler one day, and I'm traveling with my family another, and I'm doing a adventure travel to do some scuba diving by myself.
Absolutely. So
I can assign a persona to my preferences.
But you don't. The real success here is not having you assign the persona. It's having the system automatically assign the persona and seeing based on your behavior. Oh, if he's going with another person that has the same last name over a weekend, these are the types of things that he likes. And if he's going in the middle of the week by himself for 2 nights, these are the things that he likes. Or if he's going with 3 other people for a 10-day trip, these are the things that he likes. And then when you actually invoke a search, then based on the characteristics of that search, to call the correct profile and use the correct profile, that's the success. We've done this very few times so far, but that's definitely where this needs to go.
Hi, I'm John. Just wondering if you could share some more information around the sources of your data. I mean, I strongly agree on the point that the success of an OTA these days is personalization. I can assure you that I work for Expedia Affiliate Network, and a lot of the brands in the Expedia family have been investing very significantly into personalization. So I think they came a long way compared to what we have seen here. But
these were taken last week.
Okay.
So this is not.
But in general, like, I believe that they use proprietary information. They use first-party data to be able to create personalized experiences. So I was trying to understand, how do you work with multiple companies, and do you have to sign NDAs to not create one single profile of a traveler? How do you share this across multiple businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a big and very important question that comes up with every deployment that we do, because our customers obviously don't want us to share the data across customers, especially for a known traveler. So if we have a known traveler, that data cannot be shared across customers, and each of these customers is on their own silo, so the data is not shared and there are no risks in that particular area. Saying that, the more data we collect and the more data we have in an anonymized way, it trains the recommender system overall and it improves the recommender system overall, So the more data we have from more customers, everybody's recommendations get better, not for an individual traveler, but in the aggregate. And that's a very important distinction.
Thanks.
All right, let's have a round of applause for Gadi Bashvitz.